Welcome, everyone, to the Robert Timmons Show. And today's guest is Tonia Emery, who has been speaking for 10 years as a keynote speaker and guest speaker for leadership. Her favorite talk is on courage as the foundation of leadership. And other talks are about build effective leadership development programs, leadership competencies, and how to coach leaders to perform better. Welcome to the show, Tonia.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Look at you, already in the books.
I'm already in it. Yeah.
So where are you calling in from today?
I am Houston, Texas.
Okay.
It's deep heat of the summer right now.
Absolutely, because I'm not too far from you, I believe.
Yes, you're right around the corner. So it's super hot right now.
Yes, it is. And I do my bike rides around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So I'm like in 95 degrees, really pushing my body as much as I can.
You're a champ then.
Well, we're heading towards that direction anyways. As long as I keep chasing, I'll keep learning and keep growing, right?
I love it.
Well, let's get right into it, because one of the things that we mentioned on the intro here was courage. And I really find that fascinating when we were talking about this earlier in the week, how you say courage is the foundation of leadership. I would love to hear this.
Well, I think you first have to start with how courage is defined. And for me, or leaders that I work with and organizations I work with, to me, courage is stepping up to the tough stuff. So being willing to do the things that no one else is going to do, regardless of personality or politics or consequence. Leaders that have a ton of courage, and they're rare, are the ones that are going to tackle those ethical issues, those decisions, those political landmines, the sacred cows, all of those things. So it's foundational. When I look at, if you define it that way, really define it with those behaviors, I don't think we have enough people leading with courage. And why I see it as foundational is if you look at all the other leadership competencies, and there's a lot of frameworks out there. I work with a 18 competency model, but I look at all of those other competencies, and you can only get so far in the proficiency of those competencies if you lack courage. For instance, emotional intelligence. If you're working on your emotional intelligence, at some point it's going to take a lot of courage to look in that mirror and actually accept that there's some things that are going on there that you might need to change. So I see a lot of leaders get so far, but then when it gets really uncomfortable because of those fears, like that fear of being liked, or the fear of failure, or the fear of not being accepted, which we all face, if they don't have courage, they'll get stuck and they'll get so far. And that can be applied with personal credibility. There's some leaders out there that are trustworthy and ethical, and then the really tough spot where they need courage, if they can't step up, everyone sees it, they know it, people are watching us all the time when we lead, their credibility actually goes ticked back. You know what I mean? Like, people are seeing it, and then they might not believe in that leader the way they used to. It's only when the really tough stuff.
It's kind of like, I have a 3-year-old child, so I kind of see what you're talking about right now, where I have to be the leader for that, that little boy, but yet he's testing and testing and testing to see where I break. And then he finds the weakness, and then he pushes that weakness more and more and more. Now, do you see that in the business world with these leaders? Do you see the people under them that they're supposed to be leading, testing and seeing, and is that how they're finding that weakness and credibility?
Oh, for sure. I think that's a great analogy. Leaders lead their kids the same as parents. And then the other departments you work with are like siblings. So those rivalries, and it's the same. You got to be able to step up to that. And people will push you. Your employees will push and test. Other colleagues will push and test. The group think, kind of the organizational system, will push and test. Everything's always trying to get back to a calm status quo. But it takes courage to continue to push to that outcome when it gets uncomfortable.
Now, how much of this courage is ego?
I don't know. I think the courage, I've worked with leaders that are really courageous, and I don't think they're arrogant or egotistical. I think they just genuinely, maybe it's confidence. Like they have worked through that fear of being liked, where they can get past that fear and actually get over to that, I'm going to do what's right, even if I'm the only one standing there. Like, I'm willing to stand alone. So I don't know if it's ego as much as confidence and being willing to let go of some of those fears.
Very
You know,
cool. Very
and
cool.
I think, I've seen leaders actually paralyze some other competencies because they lack courage, like decision making. I've worked with senior leaders that were fantastic, like not just competent, but probably like an expert. They could be helping other people with decision making, the speed, the quality, all of that. They knew instinctually, pulling from their other skills and intelligence, the right decision, but then they'd sit in a group at a senior meeting, and then that pushback, then they'd either get quiet or go with the group think, go with what everyone else was saying. And I would be like, oh my gosh, why would you back down on what's the right decision? And it's just courage, just that I'm going to freeze or I'm not going to step up because it's unpopular and I'm getting pushback. So can
So
I,
what you're saying is sometimes when they're actually the head of the area, meaning they have their people below them and they're able to lead well, but when they go with their peers, they seem to back up and not continually step up what they really want to do in a leadership role.
yeah. So they're good leaders. They've got other capability, but without courage. So I see them get paralyzed. I see them get stuck. So not just not be able to progress competency in other areas, but literally get stuck and
Right.
paralyzed.
Now, is that because possibly that the people that they're surrounded, their peers, may not be good leaders, maybe have different types of personalities that are kind of like taking control of the whole situation and not allowing someone to speak up? Could that be part of it?
For sure. When I work with groups, particularly at the senior level, there's usually only one or two that have that courage and everybody knows it, and it can make the others feel uncomfortable. So those that are actually not willing to change, or it makes them really uncomfortable, or they don't want to go have that tough conversation. At the senior level, you're making decisions that impact the whole organization. And those are the tough ones, which is why you make more money.
Hmm.
So there might be other people at the senior table that don't want to actually go deliver that bad news. And I imagine it's happening all over right now when organizations are doing cutbacks and layoffs and pay cuts. Somebody's driving some of that decision. And I would bet there's courage, and there's going to be leaders that are like going to hesitate in making that decision, because at some point it's going to take courage to sit down and fire someone that you might have a great relationship with, or cut back someone's pay, or not pay out a bonus. So right now more than ever, I think leaders need that courage, because it is about performance. Like, we exist as leaders to perform. We're moving a group of people towards outcomes, to get those outcomes, and that takes courage.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you. And we are in unique times that, this isn't just a localized thing. This is a global issue going on right now. And hopefully it turns out good soon. I know there's going to be a massive ripple effect here, but yeah, so that's awesome. Courage, I find courage to be a very strong character in a person.
Mhm.
And that courage, I believe we all have it within us.
For sure.
It's the roar inside of us that we need to find how to get that roar out in a proper way. That's not anger. It's
Mhm.
not, negative in any manner, that it's constructive and builds and brings people together. Absolutely.
I agree.
Fabulous. So now the big question here, are people born to be leaders, or can they learn to be one?
So I think it's a little bit of both. I think there's two things that are innate in us that you have to consider, because I do think they can actually be predictive of your capability as a leader. And one is IQ, which has some genetic predisposition, and the other is personality. So, well, personality has a nature nurture to it, but I think those two elements have to be considered, because there's lots of research and data that shows there's a certain IQ required to lead, especially as you lead at senior level, and some of the personality constructs. So when you look at drive, which is part of our personality, people with higher drive, it might be easier for them to tackle some of the leadership stuff, or people that have more openness to experience or less neurotic. I think they put the person in a position to become a better leader. But to your point, I do believe people can learn leadership. They have to be open to learn. They've got to be willing to move the needle of those competencies. And I think it takes being a learner, like first, like you said, I'm a learner. You said that earlier when we kicked this off. And that's hugely important because I work with a lot of people that aren't actually open as they get older, or maybe it's their ego. They aren't open to take in something new. I think they have to be open to change. So great leaders know that you're constantly evolving. And so even if you're a CEO, I worked with CEOs, and so hey, they've arrived, right? Like they've got that position, but it doesn't mean they have stopped learning and they need to change their leadership as they continue to grow. And they've got to be willing to seek help and support. So I think
Right. And
three things.
that's kind of a point I want to get to is, you know, when someone becomes, they're appointed, you have managers and you have leaders. I do find them to be different.
Mhm,
Um, I'll explain my part. A manager, has to manage people, right?
mhm,
A leader has to lead people. And
mhm.
that's kind of how I see it. So when someone becomes appointed to become the leader, would you consider that to be a management position? And they also, I would assume, need someone above them that can show them how to lead properly. If you keep, pointing people higher and higher up the rung, and they don't have those skills, and you know, how are they? Let's just get you. We'll get to your question. We'll get to your answer because I think I'm just kind of jumping around here. But where do you see leadership and management and how they play out, and how it actually helps with the business?
I agree with you. I do think management and leadership is different, and managers are typically managing tasks to get to execution, but they're probably in there doing some of the work as well. Where once you grow into a leadership role, you're really leading the strategy, and then you step back and you're empowering and developing and moving the work through others. And it can go back and forth depending on what role you're at, or sometimes companies, I'm sure right now with all the reorganization, people are taking on things just because there's less people to do work. But 100% agree, there's a bit of a difference, from the tactical to the more strategic, and
Right.
the bigger picture, the looking at the enterprise and leading profitability and strategy and big decisions across your department. So looking inward and managing the team, and then moving kind of, I call it lifting up and looking forward, looking at how everything intersects across the whole enterprise and starting to lead that.
Absolutely. And I would add empowering the people that you're leading,
Hmm.
which would help execute your plan,
For sure.
right? Because I guess you would see who would be, who has the qualities
Hmm.
of like some areas that you really want to push harder. And, instead of kind of like getting anybody old, into an area that makes them uncomfortable, they're not ready for it. A leader would look at that and say, okay, we're going to put you over here. We're going to put you over here. It's like you say, it's going to be a strategic kind of play,
Yep.
where a manager would just push anybody, or not really know how to push someone properly, and just push the wrong person, maybe right out the door,
Yeah.
because
For
they
sure.
put them in the wrong position. They put them, where they were uncomfortable, not ready, whatever it is. I
Mhm.
see that played out quite a bit. I do see a lot of managers not being leaders. I don't see a lot of leaders.
I
And when
don't.
you do see a leader, it's like incredible.
It's rare. And I
It
say
is.
that, and I'm not always a fan popular for saying that because it's so honest, but I do have a lot of courage, and I don't need to be popular and I don't need to be right. I just look at what I see, and I don't see, if I were to look, I could probably count on my two hands in my life the great leaders that I worked for or worked with. And it's unfortunate because there's hundreds of people, thousands of people in leadership roles.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I want to kind of get that distinguished separation,
Hmm.
because sometimes people become managers and they believe they're leaders,
Yes.
but yet they're not doing quality work aspects, building up the team. When the morale's low, then
Mhm.
there must be something you should be looking within and not at your people.
Absolutely.
because you're the leader.
That's right. I always say, I use the analogy, and I'm not a sports person, but I always come back to this, is being a great leader. I do not understand why we don't look to professional sports. And when a team continues to lose, they fire the coach. Always. They don't go fire
Yep.
all the players, they fire the coach. But in organizations, they fire the players. I don't get
Absolutely.
it.
There's so much truth in that. I agree with you 100% on that. And that's true. I've been around the block quite a bit, and I've seen a lot of people above me that didn't, push us properly. And
Right.
when you start hearing the rumble of the crowd,
Mm-hmm.
then someone's ignoring it. And that's
Yeah.
when you should be really asking. So, just like anything in business, they normally want to ask their market, right? So they know what the problems are so they can solve them
Right.
in a good way. Well, this is kind of like that. Yeah, you're the leadership of a department. You want
Mm-hmm.
to know the problems so you can tackle those problems and improve it for your workers.
Absolutely.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. I'm so glad I got your recognition on that one, because that's been a tough one. So where does the mindset play in the leadership role? Because I believe mindset is a foundation of everything. If your mind's not in the game, you're not in the game. And I want to kind of get your thoughts on that.
I think it's 100%. I think it's all attitudinal. When I work with clients, there's some people I decide I don't want to work with because of exactly what you said. So when I tackle, whether it's working with an individual or a team or within an organization, I believe you have to be aware, you have to make a commitment to do something different so that you can hit that transcendence. And so I call it ACT, to be simple. And creating the awareness is where I believe a lot of people might need help, because we all have those blind spots. But that commitment, if you aren't going to commit to do anything different, then nothing's going to change. If nothing changes,
Mhm.
nothing changes. So I think mindset is huge, because we wake up every day and we decide, right? Like, we all have bad days or whatever, but we have to decide, I'm going to commit, I'm going to do something different, I'm willing to learn, I'm willing to change. And if you don't have that, I think leadership is a responsibility, and it goes beyond just we need a name in a box. And if you are a great leader, you should get more boxes underneath you. And if you're not a good leader, you get 0 boxes underneath you. It's just
No,
I,
absolutely. I really do. The commitment, that's what the mindset's all about, is driving consistency and perseverance and commitment, like you said, in order to ensure that you are moving forward
yeah.
in a
And
way that everybody's moving with you. You
yeah,
don't even have to say things, and people just know what you want, and they follow because they believe in you.
that's
That's
right.
good leadership, I think.
It's great leadership. And you can't play follow the leader alone. If no one's behind you, you're not leading, to your point. And I 100% agree. And the mindset that I wish I could crack with some of the people that are out there is, it's not a one and done. So you can go to a workshop, you can go through a leadership development program. It doesn't mean you're done. I'm looking at some of the books behind you. There's a couple that I absolutely love, because it's forever.
Right.
You might get really great at one competency or really proficient at something, and then you move on to something else. It's never over. And that's a mindset. And if you don't have that mindset, I do not believe you're going to be successful as a leader.
Oh, absolutely. They say every CEO, not every CEO, but the average CEO reads like 50, 60 books a year.
Yeah.
And I definitely agree with that. I'm a huge book reader now. And as you see, I do have some over there. And I find patterns.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of patterns in these books. And when, these books give you nuggets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you see the same nugget in every book, then you should implement that in your life and see how it works for you.
Yeah.
It's not saying it's going to, but it's that opportunity. Now you've been aware of it, try it out. Does it
Yeah.
work? And someone in a leadership role can definitely take great knowledge from books
For
and,
sure.
and implement it and say, hey, does this work? And
For
they probably would be like blown away that, it may just work.
One of my favorite books on courage is Courage, the Backbone of Leadership by Gus Lee. And there's even just one chapter you read that I think you could pull so much out of. And I always recommend that to people because they come back and they realize, holy cow, they think courage, it goes back to defining the behaviors, but actually crossing through our fears. It's not about not having fear. It's about facing those fears and still acting anyways, and still making sure, to your point, that character and that ethics and that value system are not compromised. And too many people drown in the river of fear.
I do believe there's levels of courage too, because I know, like you talked about, people get up to a certain point and then they shut down because maybe that fear got way too much strong. They thought about it too much. But there is that level of courage, to get up to certain points. And I think when you reach that, that's when you need to really start looking elsewhere, get a mentor,
Yeah,
a coach of some manner, consultant, whatever it is, in order to push yourself past that wall. Some people don't realize we have imaginary walls. We just don't know where they are at times, and we don't know how to get through them. And then when we realize they're there, we didn't really know that they were there. Kind of, it's such a hidden area that we can improve consistently.
I agree. I agree. And I think it's with leaders I see, they usually get more comfortable, courageous down because you're in that role of authority. It's a little harder to do it with your colleagues, and it's really hard to do it up. So they usually get their confidence as a leader with their courage because they have that authority. But once you lose authority and you're leveraging influence, and then you're just leveraging character, when you go up and then up to up to up and skip up, and that's tough.
Yeah. Yeah, the last business I was involved with, they talked about the more you got up, the more you had to kiss butt and
Oh,
lie, and you hear a lot of lies, and it's like, how do you run a business when you're engulfed in such stormy weather, in a sense?
yeah, it always amazes me the profit that still churns in those scenarios, because I've worked in those too and sat at some of those executive tables and been the lonely voice. And I'm like, how on earth are we here? Like, in it,
Mm.
you're right. Those systematic patterns and group behaviors are fascinating, but also sad when you're thinking like it's not a nonprofit. You're here to make money, but sometimes you get a group of people together and they start feeding their own egos or each other's egos or these alliances to protect certain things, and you lose sight of the objective.
Right.
You're there for performance.
And you just see how amazing it would be if they did go strictly with the leadership qualities and
Mhm.
then constantly improve and empower their team. They would
Yep,
make a well-oiled engine, right?
absolutely. Absolutely.
And if we can just cut off the heads of these people that are creating these alliances to hold their own jobs, like, that's fear.
Yeah.
If you're doing that, that's fear. And you're not really helping the company. You're not helping yourself. You're not helping people below you, you know. Yeah. So it just blows my mind that I do see that. It is reality out there, sadly.
I always say, like, if you can't afford a leadership development program or you don't know where to start, I'm like, just fire all the really crappy leaders first. It sends the best message.
That would put a lot of fear in the water there, for sure.
Oh.
So what are your thoughts of someone being brought up through the ranks of the business? They come from the bottom, they've been brought up, placed in leadership management roles with no proper training. What are your thoughts on that? What have you seen? Do you know any examples that you've witnessed, how it played out, positive, negative?
Yeah, well, first, I think it happens way too often. I think I call them one of the big three BS excuses of why you don't do leadership development well. And that's, you know, either whether, oh, they're technically great. That's one of the biggest excuses. They're good technically. But if they suck as a leader, then you can't put them in that role. So it's happening way too often. And whether it's, hey, we're moving so fast, we're too busy, we don't have the right talent pools, we don't have the money for leadership development. I mean, there's tons of excuses out there of why people continue to put bad leaders in leadership roles. So, I mean, that's my first thought. It's still happening way too often, and it's all fixable. You create leadership pipelines, you do those talent strategies where You look at your business plan and your business strategy, and you predict how many people you're going to need, and you go build that. And you create those leadership standards and expectations. So, I mean, at minimum, if organizations would simply just tell people why leaders exist, which is for performance, and what's expected of them, that would be light years ahead of where a lot of companies are. And the second thought I have on that is companies that are doing it, dare I say, dare I be this courageous to say, is a lot of the training sucks. It's not actually leadership development training. I've seen programs where they're being trained on how to approve payroll or how to push through a PTO request or a vacation request. I'm like, that's not leadership development. Or let's train them on employment law, or let's just the craziest stuff. And then they'll say, well, we're training our leaders. I'm like, well, no, that's administrative. Those are the administrative jobs as a leader, and they need to be educated on that, but you can do that in a 60-minute online training. Leadership development is about building those individual competencies like emotional intelligence and courage and resilience and credibility, and those team competencies around collaboration and communication and developing a team and decision making and strategy and service delivery. I do not see the programs actually training that and bringing those outcomes. So I think that's my second thought. And the last one is having organizations need to have the courage to wait and actually not put someone in a role. Reorganize. Again, go back to, if you're really good at leadership, you get more boxes. If you're not good at leadership, you get 0 boxes. And sticking to that standard. Wait, or give them support. But too many times I hear, well, we know they're not a good leader, but ah.
Yeah,
So,
the big but.
but
That means nothing just happened was said right.
yes.
We'll rewrite it after the but. We'll try them out for another year. Let's see what happens.
Oh, in the meantime, people suffer, right?
Oh,
or,
absolutely.
or they're a really good person. I hear all the time, well, he's a really good guy. Oh my goodness.
That's right. Yeah. Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank was just talking about, they were saying, so you said that you should be able to fire your mother,
Mm, yeah,
and he says, hey, business comes first.
yeah, that's right.
You can't have emotions and that in a business. You got to know what's working and what's not working and remove what's not working.
That's
You
right.
got to have that. And that's the courage that you're talking about. That's the leadership that you're talking about.
And quickly, like you said something earlier about, oh, well, we'll see, we'll give it another year. I mean, I've seen senior level people be kept, and I get you don't want to churn through your senior team, but people knew, and it's the same issue. So how many years are you going to let that go on? It blows my mind. And it happens all the time, all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, that just blows my mind because, I've only seen a few myself in my lifetime, but you dealing with this on a regular basis, it's sad to hear,
Yeah.
but it's good for business for you, right?
Yeah.
You got some stuff to improve. You got some people to enhance in a sense and train and empower them so they can empower others in such a greater manner.
Leadership is a multi-billion-dollar business out there, and companies do invest globally billions of dollars, and only a finite amount of that is put into leadership development. And I would flip it, like I would flip it to
Right.
be more like Steve Jobs, where it's like, look, you're hiring really bright people, so they're going to tell you what to do. You don't hire bright people and tell them what to do. And if we took all that money that we're investing in training, the training is the multi-billion, we are hopefully bringing in and recruiting people that can do the job. So then you can put your money into the leadership capability if you have it. We shouldn't be bringing people in and then training them all the time. Like, you should bring them in pretty proficient, to hit
Right.
running. So when I say flip it, I just mean look at all the training. And if your training budget is weighted so heavily on job training, unless it's safety or regulatory, man, we should be putting more into our leaders. It's a
Oh,
more complex
absolutely.
job.
Absolutely. We need good leaders out there for sure. I agree with that 100%. So for our listeners, do you have at least 3 tips that you can kind of help them to become that badass leader? I watched one of your videos. I heard you talk about the badass leader, and I would like to know a little bit more about this badass leader and maybe some tips that we can take away from it for sure.
For sure. Well, this is, I have a private Facebook group for my badass leaders, and, to get in, that's the criteria. I have 3 criteria, so I'll share that with you because I think it goes across what our discussion is the first one is you really have to be a lifelong learner. And I'm not like, because that's the cool thing to say, or that's what you want to tell your boss is, oh, I'm a lifelong learner. I mean, truly being that lifelong learner means you never stop and
Right.
you're always willing to take on something new. And it could be something that isn't even leadership. Like you could learn marketing strategy, or you could learn something technical with systems. It doesn't matter, but really truly opening yourself up to I am a learner. And the second one is being open to change. And so this sounds super simple. Everybody says that. But the truth is, our resistance, our natural human resistance to keep a comfortable status quo is real. And the arrogance that people face, the higher they go and the more money they make, that they believe they're done because they're hitting a certain pay or a certain title. So really being open to change and not letting the resistance and the arrogance get us caught up. Like, because we all have stuff and we all should be working on those 2 to 3. I always tell people, you should know your 2 to 3, those 2 to 3 development gaps all the time. And the last would be being willing to work within the context and knowing what that structure is. That's why I like to use a competency framework, because there's 18, it's a lot, but leadership is complex and it's hard. But everyone can look at those 18 and pick 2 to 3, because I've never met anyone fully capable, competent, or have a strength in all 18 and then have that support. So, it's being a lifelong learner, being open to change, and being willing to work in context and have support. Like, you have to have the right support. You can't, whether it's an accountability partner or a coach or a mentor or a group of people that are learning with you, or a mix of all of that, you have to have support, because it's, when you're developing, it's hard. You're trying new
Well,
things.
they say build a team. And if
Yep.
that team is to keep you accountable, that team is there to keep you learning and keep you
Mhm.
holding to what you've committed to,
Mhm.
then we all need it.
We all
We
need
all
it.
need a coach. We all need a mentor. We all need, to build a team that makes us shine the best we can.
People are usually shocked when I tell them, eh, I don't know if it's like, so I've been doing this a really long time. And, as a psychologist, people get shocked that I tell them I have a coach. I'm like, I've always had a coach, because I have my own stuff too. And just because I drive this stuff and I help organizations with this stuff, or I'm a coach to people, doesn't mean that I don't need my own gut check. And one of the things that I won't, because I am a lifelong learner and I want to be great at this, I have to do the work myself. It's, I got to go in for oil change once in a while.
Oh, absolutely. How do you learn if you're not, you don't have someone to helps you reach for the next level,
Right. And
right? Because you can't do it yourself.
my
What's
coach,
that?
my coach is hard on me. He pings me between the eyes, and we have a very wonderful relationship, but there's times I get off my coaching calls annoyed, and not with him, but just annoyed because I just got told something that doesn't feel great. And
Mm,
I'll toss and turn a little bit at night. And then after I put my big girl pants on, I realize, all right, well, what I'm annoyed about is he's right. And he asked me some questions that made me
exactly.
think about things I got to be better and do different. So just want to be better.
Oh,
That's
absolutely.
want to be great.
No, those are great, great tips. And it's so true. If you stop wanting to be better,
Mm-hmm.
you've stopped growing. You've stopped learning. You're stuck in this bubble that really soon depression comes, like, all that down spiral happens. We're meant to grow. We're meant to lead. I believe we're all meant to get out there and be, we all empower others in some manner. And we're talking here, we're talking about leadership and business. And definitely you have a responsibility to
Mm,
be the best you can in business, to not only for the business, for the people that you're serving,
That's right.
because you're serving those people. You're not the
Mm-hmm.
owner of them. You're not, you're not the boss of them in a sense that they have to do what you say. You're in the boss with them, that you want them to be the best they can be.
That's right. And that's why it's all about performance. And I think I'm not knocking anybody out there who's trying to make a genuine difference, but leadership isn't as fluffy as some of this multi-billion-dollar stuff that's going out there. And I believe in all of the emotional side of it, but it is a business. So when your box is on the top, all of those boxes underneath you, your number one objective is results and moving that group to those results. And so you can never lose sight of that. So I think sometimes we're doing that. It's engagement is huge, but the number one thing that engages people is working on stuff that matters. They more and more and more and more and more data continuously says the same thing. People want to go to work every day and contribute value.
Right.
That's the work, that's the result. And so we have to stop doing the pizza parties and birthday cupcakes and stuff. Like, that stuff is fine, but that's not engagement. The engagement is, let's make sure that everyone comes to work and knows what their work is and how it's contributing and it's being measured. People want to win. Again, back to sports, is the reason why sports teams are so effective is there's a scoreboard on either end of those stadiums all the time with a timer. And we don't do that enough in organizations. We have to be keeping score. There is no participation award. Like, everyone's got a role. Like, if you're in hockey, everyone's got a role on the ice. You get penalized when there's too many people on the field. We got to take it back to performance.
Absolutely. Tonia, I want to thank you for sharing all these amazing qualities that a leadership should have, the tips, everything that you put out there, and, especially how to become a badass leader. I think that's cool. If everyone can just please share the knowledge that you heard today from Tonia's key information, reach others to help them become badass leaders as well. And also remember, follow the Robert Timmons Show, and you can get notified weekly on our shows that come out. I want to thank you, Tonia, and I appreciate everything you've shared today.
You're so welcome. I loved it. It's my pleasure.